Now study and discussion questions for great books, the interpretation of dreams. According to Freud, what is the purpose of dreaming? What are the 4 components of dream work? Discuss what our dreams can tell us about ourselves. Why did Freud believe that studying dreams was so important? Assignment Discovery now presents Great Books, the interpretation of dreams.
There is a dark side to each one of us where our forbidden fear, lust, and anger lurk. These unconscious desires do not rest quietly in the human psyche. They are, in a sense, our enemy within. One man believed he could exorcise our demons through the study of dreams. Sigmund Freud took pride in disturbing the sleep of humanity. At the turn of the century in Vienna, Austria, Dr. Sigmund Freud claimed he had discovered a new doorway to the unconscious.
So, tell me anything that comes into your mind. Perhaps we could begin with your dream last night.
As a child, I had a recurring nightmare of falling down what seemed to be an endless well.
Drive for miles and miles down this tunnel.
When suddenly we're attacked by a sea creature. Turns out to be a giant octopus.
And I may have been invisible at the time.
There's a man in front of her with a snake. I can see the teeth of the snake.
Out from the tunnel, out onto the deck of a sailboat.
Chases me through the ship, and eventually I come to a door behind which I know the octopus is waiting for me.
I woke up before I reached the bottom.
I shall bring forward proof that there is a psychological technique which makes it possible to interpret dreams.
Freud's self-proclaimed masterpiece, The Interpretation of Dreams, offered readers a window into our most secret selves. In his revolutionary work, Freud suggested that often the purpose of dreams is to satisfy through fantasy the instinctive urges that society judges unacceptable. The laws of logic that rule our waking world do not apply to the kingdom of sleep, where we are free to experience fantastic adventures. For Freud, this liberation of fantasy was a path that led to the heart of the unconscious. He promised us a profoundly deeper understanding of the human condition. Freud is inescapable. His terminology and his ideas pervade contemporary life. He taught us to pay attention to feelings and actions that we once thought meaningless. provoking a confrontation with our more primitive selves. After Freud, it was not so easy to avoid responsibility for unconscious behavior.
What Freud did was to build a whole system of interpretation aimed at exposing the real meaning for an act that seemed to have no meaning at all. Something that seemed to come just from our bodies, just out of habit, something that we didn't pay attention to. Freud found in that the key to what we might really be desiring. And whether we reject psychoanalysis or embrace it, that's a move that 20th century culture is built upon.
Freud famously described dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, and firmly believed that he had begun to unravel their full mystery. By the end of the 19th century, consciousness began to be seen as a rational process. It was also believed that behind all psychological functioning, there had to be a physical origin, a biological cause for every mental effect. Freud, too, viewed the human brain in mechanical terms, somewhat like a steam engine. He saw the brain as a complex neural network in which neurons build up electrical charge and, as a result, require discharging. Freud envisioned that dreams occurred during discharge.
Freud comes at a period in the history of Europe where there has been this tremendous successful liberalism, this great industrial revolution, the apparent triumph of science and ideas, and at the same time, this increasingly powerful feeling that something is amiss, that things aren't working right, that aggression, violence, and hatred are still major issues.
I was standing in a garden.
Freud's work on dreams began in 1887 when he was seeing a number of young women who suffered from what was then called hysteria, a puzzling complex of symptoms that ranged from aches and twitches to complete paralysis. He grew to believe his patients' symptoms were elaborate defenses against the pain of long-forgotten psychic shocks. Freud treated them, unsuccessfully, with hypnosis. But when patients spontaneously began describing their dreams, he was intrigued. Eventually, Freud became convinced of the role that dreams could play in revealing hidden trauma.
He brought me a box.
What was in the box?
I was very much afraid to open it.
When Freud and a patient were working together to interpret a dream, he asked the patient what the patient could remember, which is called the manifest content of the dream. He then asked the patient to sort of associate to each of the elements of the dream, and that simply meant to say everything that came to mind in connection with both the dream as a whole and to each particular detail of the dream.
Freud's interpretation of the meaning of dreams was based on his larger view of human nature. He saw us as basically selfish animals driven by aggressive urges and the desire for pleasure. We learn how to repress our animal impulses as we grow up in order to get along in society, but we never totally conquer our primitive selves. This animal self, which contains the core of the psyche, Freud called the id. The ego and the superego are later developments that arise from the need to survive and adapt to the surrounding social environment. The ego is our rational self. The superego represents societal pressures and tells us what is right and wrong. The superego is frequently in conflict with the id. Freud saw the psyche as a battleground, with the various personality components engaged in ongoing struggle. Feelings are being repressed if the ego or superego become too dominant over the id. To Freud, emotion unexpressed often led to problems.
What Freud says in the interpretation of dreams, in saying that every dream is a fulfillment of a disguised wish, is that our meanings are disguised, that we don't know for sure what things are significant. But we need to find ways of discovering how they may be related to our desires, how what we do unconsciously, without thinking, may be related to our fundamental desires, maybe even expressing those fundamental desires without our being aware of it. Once one opens that question, it's not up to then some scientist or philosopher to come on and say, they don't really mean anything. No, the issue is then, how are we going to make sense of things, events, words, activities that we used to not bother about? And now we decide, yes, I'm going to bother about that. I'm going to try to see what that means about my life or about my friend's life or about our relationship. And psychoanalysis in Freud's hands opened up that question.
In the interpretation of dreams, Freud laid out a formula which could make sense of even the most confusing dream. His theory relies on a part of the mind he called the censor, which edits our dreams. If we dreamed about the literal fulfillment of desire, he said, the powerful emotions this would create would wake us. The censor transforms the dream content to disguise its true meaning. Freud called this transformation of desire dream work. It is composed of a number of processes. Displacement shifts emotion from one idea to another. Condensation fuses together multiple thoughts into a single symbol. Along with symbolization and projection, dreamwork components join together to change and redirect dream thoughts and images into acceptable forms. After the censor has completed its dream work, the ego reorganizes the otherwise bizarre components of the dream so that it has an apparent meaning called the manifest dream. The process of dream interpretation involves decoding the manifest dream content to discover the real hidden meaning of the dream called the latent dream. Freud insisted that dream life is as important as real life. Stripped to bare essentials, a dream unanalyzed was to Freud an unopened letter. In every dream, there is always another story. There is more than meets the eye.
Many of the dreams and the interpretation of dreams that he discusses, and many of the themes that he discusses, are dreams and themes about how do you live with loss? How do you make sense of the past when elements of the past are going to disappear from your life, and how do you retain them in some form that's meaningful?
I had this dream not long ago that reveals to me the death of my mother. I was just dreaming that I was in the church with my mother, and we were singing and glorifying the Lord. And suddenly, there was a man covered with blood. He burst into the church, and everybody was running. I was running. To my greatest surprise, my mother was standing, waiting to know what was going on with this man. And I was so frightened, so scared from the dream, that I opened my eyes and I woke up. And 5 days later, I received a phone call that my mother had an accident and she died.
The study of Freud is sometimes considered more of a religion than a science, and yet when measured against scientific findings, at least some of Freud's theories hold true. Everybody dreams, probably. Although many of us forget them, during a normal night's sleep we dream for about 1/5 of the time. Our most vivid dreams come to us during REM, rapid eye movement sleep. They can be as intense and emotional as real-life experiences. At the Bethesda Sleep Disorder Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, experiments on dreams and sleep are conducted almost daily.
He's had a scene change, like he's gone from one room to another, or the whole theme and place of the dream has changed.
Patients are attached to electrodes which measure various impulses, including REM. EEG readings, which record the electrical activity of the brain, show that these periods of rapid eye movement correspond with particular brain rhythms.
The notion that REM sleep, the physiology, has somehow destroyed, altered, or made Freud untenable, I think we too quickly, my colleagues, even my psychoanalytic colleagues, jump much too quickly to the notion that Freudian theory is somehow put aside by the laboratory work.
Freud theorized that dream function helps keep us asleep. REM theory supports this idea. The more REM we have, the more we dream. Since the most REM happens in the second half of the night when we're more likely to wake up, that is also when most dreams occur, which with their censoring, keep us asleep.
I dreamt I was high up in an apartment building watching a volcano erupt when suddenly I heard a terrible noise, and I looked out and saw a huge tidal wave coming. And at that moment I suddenly thought, my children, and I turned around and saw each of my 3 children being swept out of the building. The next moment I was in the water swimming after them, and I was trying to find them, and I was crying and crying in the water. Then I was on dry land looking for them, and I saw all these dead people lying around. And first I found my eldest daughter, and she was wet, but she was alive. Then my middle daughter, and I knew for sure my youngest daughter was dead. And sure enough, I saw her lying out among all these other people, and she was dead. And I was crying and crying, and I woke up.
The book was published in 1899, but Freud requested that the publication date be given as 1900 to create the impression that his views were pioneering thoughts for the new century. Freud's epic was ignored by disapproving colleagues and seemed only eccentric food for a handful of readers. The book sold merely 350 copies in its first 6 years. Freud was characteristically defensive.
I had dared, against the objections of severe science, to take the part of the ancients and of superstition.
Ever since Freud first declared his groundbreaking views about the mind and its operation, opinion about him has been bitterly divided. He has become the psychiatrist everybody loves to hate.
Oh, if he weren't a revolutionary creative thinker, and if he weren't right in so many areas, he wouldn't be criticized for where he's been wrong. There are, dozens of psychologists who were very largely wrong, about whom we say nothing because they really have not shaped our society.
Freud wrote prolifically after The Interpretation of Dreams was published. His later volumes included a study of the individual's relationship to society, a psychoanalytic account of Moses and the Jews, and more detailed work on the ego and the id. By 1926, Freud was an internationally known psychiatrist. Much recent criticism of Freud's ideas has centered upon his rigidly ordered view of the mind and the constant struggles among the id, ego, and superego. Research now suggests that rather than continually competing with each other, the different personality components actually coexist as partners.
Dreams are much less important, even in psychoanalysis, than they used to be. In fact, I think a lot of the impetus for dream interpretation today comes from patients who expect that ought to be part of the therapy and who, unasked, bring in dreams. And I don't know whether that is a matter of fashion or a matter of technique. I mean, psychotherapy today is so focused on concrete circumstance and external circumstance, and it's so much pressing for quick change that it may be that the dream is not the royal road or the best avenue toward the kind of information that therapists want to deal with.
I was lying there, and there were thousands of snakes and of spiders. They were coming near.
Freud was a very vigorous speculator. A lot of his speculation, from our perspective, is just wrong. His view of women is maybe in some ways progressive for its day, but not generous by our standards, not reasonable by our standards, just wrong. certainly the case can be made that many sorts of people have been injured by the application of Freudian theory. Biographers today are making the case that Freud did not act in good faith in certain circumstances. Of course, he did so many things that even if he very largely acted in good faith, there would be important areas where he might not have been. He was an ambitious, driven man. He was a contentious, sort of cantankerous person, generous in certain ways as well. And I think it is a tribute to how large and influential he is that every aspect of his personality has come under scrutiny.
Freud was really a bold and daring thinker who loved wild hypotheses, and then, more or less on the guinea pig model, tried to induce the evidence to confirm his theories in the persons of his various patients on the couch. So we have here a picture of Freud as a grand theorist, a very reckless thinker, really.
Despite his detractors, our culture has found Freud and his unsettling vision of the mind compelling enough to argue about for close to a century. His ghost is not an easy one to live with.
Many of us find ourselves in situations throughout our lives where we don't know who we are and what we need to do. Freud's response to that is make sense of your past. Find a way of making meaning out of who you have been and where you have come from. That is a way of giving yourselves more possibilities in the future, so that our choices in the present are richer, more complex, more nuanced, and, in a word, more free, because we now have an interpretation of the past. Interpretation of dreams was Freud's way of making sense of the past through signs or symptoms that people thought were meaningless. Whether or not one takes the dream as the royal route to the unconscious, it seems to me the lesson of this great book is that we make sense of our pasts because we need to be more free in the present when we have intense, sometimes painful conflict.
Perhaps not so much has changed since Dr. Freud invited us to lie down on the couch. We still understand only the smallest fragments of the human mind and its dreams. At the very least, Sigmund Freud encouraged us to examine ourselves. The analysis session is not over.
Coming up now, answers to the questions for great books. The interpretation of dreams. According to Freud, the purpose of dreaming is to satisfy, through fantasy, the instinctive urges that society judges unacceptable. The four components of dream work are displacement, condensation, symbolization, and projection. Try this activity with your class. Record your dreams in a journal for a month. Then pick a dream and translate it into a modern dance, musical composition, or dramatic piece. To learn more, members of the American Association of School Librarians and Assignment Discovery suggest Sigmund Freud by Barry Mann. Ask your librarian to help you explore the many resources your library has to offer.